This week on Quality Digest Live, we talk about distributed manufacturing and distributed management and moonshine. Why moonshine? Well, stick around and I'll tell you when we come back. Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for July 6th, 2018. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Quality Digest Editor-in-Chief, Dirk Ducharme. My good buddy Mike Richmond is on a beach in Florida somewhere sipping virgin pina coladas or something, leaving me here by myself to improvise, which is why our first story is about moonshine shops, but not the kind of shops that make 150 proof booze like during Prohibition. These moonshine shops are all about using minimal tools to come up with innovative products. Taryn Marsh describes moonshine shops in her article, Brother Moonshine, Sister Solution. And the moonshine concept came from a Japanese engineer named Chihiro Nakao, founder of the Shinji Jutsu Consulting Company, who named this method after, well, yeah, illegal alcohol beverages produced during the US Prohibition. But moonshine in this case is not so much the liquid, intoxicating kind, but is shorthand for ingenuity, frugality, and innovation all rolled into one. The Shinji Jutsu website puts it this way. Moonshine means developing valuable solutions to problems by creatively adapting materials that are already on hand. It requires looking at those materials and problems themselves with a renewed perspective of doing a lot with a little. And as you may have guessed from the name, this concept is based on moonshine stills found in the Appalachian Mountains during Prohibition. You probably know the story. So in secret, often by the light of the moon, people would take common items found around and create stills, alcohol distillation units. They were small, they were inexpensive, they were easy to move quickly if necessary to escape the revenuers who would come in and bust up your still. And it all used just stuff that was laying around, so they had to be inventive. So if you're a DIYer, either at home or at work, you kind of get the idea. I mean, you want to accomplish something at work. So maybe you got a problem that you need to solve, or maybe you want to do something like improve workflow. But your boss has said, sure, go for it, but yeah, you're not going to have any money to do it and no resources, but you still want to get it done. So what do? You probably go the deepest, darkest corner of your building where all the old equipment is cast off, and you probably mess around in there and look for bits and pieces of parts. Maybe you've got an old welder somewhere on site and a lathe. And so you start building up bits and pieces of something out of what you have at hand in order to solve a problem. It's working with what's on hand. But it's not just about small companies that do this. While small companies may moonshine or create moonshine shops out of necessity, large companies see value in it for the innovation and for getting their employees to think in maybe different ways. So for instance, I know we have a lot of Boeing people who watch this show. Boeing's factories have long put moonshine shops to good use and even have competitions called moonshine wars. Now these are really interesting. They're 2-week-long events, and teams are given $1,000. That's it, $1,000 and 2 weeks to design a solution to a production problem facing the aerospace manufacturer. So $1,000 and they're set loose. And the result has been dozens of cost-effective and outside-the-box innovations for the company. And it isn't so much just that these are inexpensive ways to solve something. I mean, Boeing's got more money than God, but the idea is it also gets employees just to think differently, not to just think that anytime you need something, you just go to a catalog and buy it. And the idea is that if you have tons of money, it's still important to constrain your innovation teams because you want them just to order and order something out of a catalog. And in fact, in the Moonshine Shop forum on the Lean Enterprise Institute website, commenter Thomas Warda writes this. He says, What you don't want are what he calls catalog engineers who only know how to buy a solution. When it comes to equipping your shop, your moonshine shop, keep it basic. A drill press, a belt sander, lathe, a mill, and some simple hand power tools are about all you want. Generally speaking, the more you spend here, the less creativity you'll get out of it. And make sure these folks also have access to the company scrap bins too. So that's great. I mean, Warda really summed it up in a nutshell. You want to deliberately constrain these guys so you force them to think. It's a great concept, and even if you haven't heard the term, it isn't that obscure. If you're interested in the topic, there's plenty of information out there on the Google. All right. Well, if you are into moonshining, you might find a 3D printer helpful. If you are interested in 3D printing as a manufacturing process, additive manufacturing, you should read the two-part article by M. Mitchell Waldrop. Really an interesting article. It's titled 3D Printing Finds a Custom Foothold in Manufacturing. It's pretty fascinating reading. It's a two-part series. Waldrop's article it's pretty wide-ranging. It deals with a lot of topics and a lot of issues. But one thing that really caught my eye that I'd never heard of is what United Parcel Service, UPS, what they're doing. They are getting into manufacturing, in a sense, which is a bit crazy if you think about it. It's a delivery company, right? UPS, FedEx, what are they doing getting into manufacturing? But here's what's going on, something I didn't know. According to Waldrop, since May 2015, in a section of its Worldport Distribution Center in Louisville, Kentucky, UPS has been operating a spare parts warehouse that has no spare parts. Instead, the facility has a bunch of ultra-fast 3D printers that can create almost any plastic part that's required and have it ready for UPS to deliver anywhere in the United States by the next morning. According to Alan Amling, UPS's Vice President for Corporate Strategy, it was kind of a no-brainer. And here's why. This is the bit I didn't know. Storing spare parts for quick delivery was already a big moneymaker for UPS. UPS operates more than 1,000 field stocking locations worldwide, all full of items that somebody might someday need, and this is by the industrial customers who pay UPS for that service. They pay UPS to keep parts on hand in a warehouse so that if they need to go out, there's probably a distribution center nearby that can get that part to their customers right away, right? So it makes sense. The problem is they hate it, the manufacturers hate it, because inventory storage costs are so huge. So UPS came up with this idea, well, rather than inventory the parts, why don't we just print them? And they're doing it, and it's turning out to be successful. He points out that 3D printing isn't cost-effective for every part, but for the Louisville, Kentucky microfactory, it's already been successful enough for UPS to replicate it at several sites around the United States, with plans to eventually take it worldwide. And right now, it's only plastic parts, and you all know that metal printing is already getting a really good run right now, and metal printing is getting better and better. So UPS plans to start metal printing parts later in 2018. But that aside, I mean, just think about it. A delivery company is now doubling as a manufacturer. In a way, we could think of this as distributed manufacturing, and really it's kind of analogous to edge computing or distributed computing, where the work is being done closer to where it's needed. I mean, this is really brilliant. UPS's Louisville microfactory is just an example, but as Waldrop, the author, points out, so is the 3D printer that NASA installed on the International Space Station back in 2016. We talked about that on the show. And the purpose for that is so that astronauts can print hard plastic ratchet wrenches and some other parts without having to wait months for the next resupply launch. They just print what they need. By the way, the Navy and the Marines are also doing the same thing, 3D printing replacement parts. So if you take this to its extreme, you can maybe envision a world not too long from now where parts are going to be made near you rather than stockpiled somewhere on the other side of the United States, or the world for that matter. And since that would negatively impact shipping companies, right, less parts being shipped around, it makes sense that they get into the manufacturing business. I mean, what UPS did, I think, is really brilliant, and I don't think it's going to be too long before we see, maybe FedEx and DHL, Amazon start following suit. So pretty interesting stuff. Keep your eye on that. Okay, well, let's leave hardware behind for a while and talk about squishyware, human interaction. What is the best tip for designing a customer experience? Well, according to author Annette France, how about pretending you're a human? That's right, when you think about it, right? For some reason, once we walk through the doors of our company, we often forget that we are humans, that we work for humans, that our customers on this planet anyway are humans, that it's impatient, busy, harried, sometimes disgruntled humans that make contact with our customer service process, and they don't like it when that customer service process isn't customer friendly, or so that they don't feel like they're dealing with a human being as opposed to a robot. And I think we get so caught up in developing a process, designing a process, regardless of whether it's a service process or a manufacturing process or an engineering process, that the process itself becomes the end-all and the be-all. And rather than the humans it is supposed to serve, it serves itself. And I can tell you that as an engineer, I often got caught up in slick, clever design and forgot that a human out on the shop floor or an end user had to actually use my design. They had to use it, and I can tell you that it doesn't matter what amount of technical wizardry goes into a design. If the experience of using your design sucks, your design sucks. It doesn't matter if it's hardware or software or humanware, squishyware, whatever you want to call it. If the product itself, if the service itself isn't user-friendly, isn't human-friendly, people are not going to like using it, and you're going to lose business. They're going to stop buying your product, or they're going to stop using your service. So we have to think like humans. And France gives 3 suggestions to help put a human lens back into your customer service, into the way you look at your customers. Really common sense stuff. First, listen. Don't just ask the customers about the experience. Listen to what they have to say, says France. There are a lot of different ways for customers to tell you about their needs and their desired outcomes and how well you are performing against their expectations. Understanding these expectations and identifying key drivers of a great customer experience is an important result of listening, actually hearing what they have to say. Number 2, characterize. Characterize your customer. You need research on your customers. You need to identify the jobs that they are trying to do. Compile profiles or personas. I call them profiles, France calls them personas, that represent the various types of prospects and customers who might buy from you or who use your products or services. For instance, as an example, an end user of your product, let's say a physical product, an end user has a different expectation when dealing with customer service than the retailer that stocks your item. So, think about it. Very often retailers may have to call back to the corporate office or the supplier and have questions on that product. What they're looking for and the way they're dealt with is different than if an end user, the person who's actually purchased the product, how they want and expect to be dealt with when they call customer service. 2 different needs. You can't deal with everybody in exactly the same way. So develop personas. Finally, you need to empathize. France suggests that you walk in your customer's shoes to get a clear understanding of the steps they take to do whatever job it is they are trying to do with your organization. Map their journeys. France talks about creating a customer journey map a lot. Map their journey to understand the current state of the user process, the user experience. And the idea behind that is actually run through the process yourself as a blank slate, or get somebody from your company who isn't familiar with the process and have them run through that process or use that product or call customer service and see what their experience is like and have them report back to you. That gives you an idea of what that journey is like. Now, I can think of an example we all can relate to. Think of the interminable phone trees where you call customer support, you get an automated system, an automated answering system, which is fine, and that gives you option after option after option after option. It feels like you're pushing buttons for 5 minutes, and they ask you for all sorts of information that you key in, your last 4 digits of your social, your day of birth, the number of your address, how many kids you have, and they do this level after level, and you're drilling down, which is great for them to gather information, but after 5 minutes of punching buttons, you finally get to a human who asks you, usually in a monotonic robotic voice, exactly the same questions. So that is kind of an example of how you don't want to do customer service. You want to talk people through it. You want them to understand that they're talking to a human, and that they understand, that you understand the process can be tedious, but sometimes you have to get it done. But how can you do it in a way that works for everybody? All right. So last story here. This one kind of came in at the last minute, so I've got to go back to my notes here. This is a really interesting one from Gallup. Yeah, there's a couple of interesting facts, 4 interesting facts that, that Gallup brought us, and I picked them up this morning. Pretty interesting. So I'll get my spectacles on here. So 4 little details brought to us by Gallup. Compared to decades past, today's workforce is defined by more flexible workspaces. 74% of employees have the ability to move to different areas or to do move to different areas in order to do their work. So, and in fact, in some offices, in some workspaces, employees don't even, I think this might be Lego, some of their employees don't even have office spaces. There are just random places spread about the headquarters where they take their laptops, they all have laptops, and they just find a place where they want to work, and they sit down, they connect to the Wi-Fi, and they start working. So there's more and more of that type of thing, these flexible workspaces that are going on. More flexible work time. 52% of employees say they have some choice over where they work, and this could mean alternate. Alternate fixed hours, let's say, 410s, 312s in some cases, where you have fixed hours, but they're may be different from one group of employees to another employees. Or maybe there's just core hours where these employees need to work, and they have some flexibility in terms of when they come in and when they leave. So flexible time is something that's been around for a while, but we're seeing more and more of it in the workplace. Another thing, remote working. 43% of employees work away from home at least some of the time. And finally, more matrixed teams. About 84%, this is an astounding number, 84% of employees are matrixed to some extent. And if you haven't heard what matrix employment or matrix management is, this is where your employees can have different bosses depending on their tasks. So on one project, their boss might be from this department. On another project, their boss might be from this department. Or they may be working on a project and have 2 bosses depending on what part of the project they are working on at the moment. So we're seeing more now. What this means, says Hickman and Pendle, is that teams make more decisions without approval from above. This means that non-managers have to act more like leaders and also see the employees have to see the big picture in the same way that they would, that the CEO of the company would do. And we talked earlier about distributed manufacturing and distributed software. This, in a sense, you could think of as distributed management, where the management is actually distributed out to the individual employees. They're kind of their own bosses. So more and more, say the authors, the organizations are looking for employees who can make independent decisions with confidence and problem solve with different peer groups and do all that, handle workload and relationships and so forth on their own with very little supervision. In other words, they're going to be their own boss, and they're going to do it for themselves, what used to be done by their managers, right? So this is quite a shift, I think, and one that I think actually is well handled by, and here's that term again, sorry, millennials. And the reason I believe that is this type of workspace, this type of group, really is more of a social or hive type activity where everybody has their own job, they know what they're supposed to do, they don't have to be told, they just go out and do it, and they come together and they meet socially, instant messaging or phone calls or email, chat, whatever it takes, just to keep in contact with each other in order to keep refreshing themselves in terms of keeping them on track in terms of what they need to be doing. So I think this is something that's kind of more something that works a little bit more easier for a newer workforce than it does for a lot of people who may have been in a managed workforce for most of their life. It's kind of a different way of thinking. But the authors ask, what happens if people have more autonomy at work? Well, there's kind of two things that happen. One is good, one isn't so great. And the first is empirical evidence, say the author, shows a correlation between increased performance and engagement as well as more sensitivity to failure. So think about that. These autonomous employees are finding it easier to get more done and to accomplish more and to perform better. But on the flip side of it, they're more attuned to the fact that it's all on their shoulders. They're doing their job. They can't blame it on a manager, on a coworker, it's all them, right? So if something goes wrong, it's all on them to fix it, and they feel more responsibility, so more disappointment if plans don't go the way they think they should, and that happens in every workplace. So the manager kind of takes on a different role. This has caused a shift in the workplace, and it alters what employees need from their managers, from their organizational manager, the manager that shows up on the org chart. And you've got to remember, I mentioned this distributed management idea. Hickman and Pendle actually refer to it as, what do they call it, decentralized management. Instead of having one manager, which is kind of the traditional way, you have let's call it subject matter experts that are managers. So you have a manager that is responsible for technical problems, technical expert. You have another manager which is maybe deals with interpersonal relationships, and maybe another one that's a career coach. So that as employees who are working on their own, being their own manager, kind of dictating how they work, they still have people they can go to that can give them advice on either technical advice or how to deal with workplace stress, how to deal with other employees. Kind of the same thing that you might get from your traditional manager if you had one, but now you don't necessarily. Now, this doesn't mean that you get rid of managers completely, and the authors really want to say that you still need your traditional manager, if for no other reason than legal reasons. I mean, you still need to have, sometimes you need disciplinary action. You might need people who need to be fired. You might need to hire more people and so forth. And so you need a traditional manager that will handle those tasks. And like I said, some of that's for human resources and legal reasons as well. But the idea here is that managers step in when they're needed, and they kind of stay in the background, a little bit invisible when they're not needed. And so this is really kind of a completely different shift. Now, according to Hicknell and Pendle, the old rules of management no longer apply, and that means leaders must reinvent management for more autonomous workforce of the future. So this is what you can expect to see coming to a workplace near you. So we're going to end the show just a little bit early today and wrap things up. But I do want to tell you that we are going to be gone. The next 2 episodes actually are going to be reruns. They're going to be canned episodes. We're moving our studios. We're going to move to a completely new studio. It's got it's a bigger space. It gives us more room to spread out. We can do more video production in the studio than we can here. So we're really excited to move there, but it's kind of a lot of both technical and physical moving that we have to do. So for the next 2 weeks, we'll be gone. We will be back on July 27th. But for the next 2 weeks, we'll give you some reruns, and hopefully they'll be really the favorite ones that you've seen in the past. So thanks for joining us today, and we will see you live in 3 weeks. So long.